Well, hello and welcome to another offering for the living of these days, Epiphany edition. Community of practice and finding Christ in the neighborhood has led me into exploring neo monastic ways and the creating of rules of life for the living of these days. So today's phrase is monastic rhythms and the rule of life in the neighborhood. In the article, The New Monasticism, A Quest for Spiritual Renewal in the Urban Desert by Warren Ozaki, he writes, the concept for a new monasticism was first suggested in 1935 by Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who wrote, the restoration of the church will surely come from a sort of new monasticism, which has in common with the old only the uncompromising attitude of a life lived according to the Sermon on the Mount and the following of Christ. Adair McIntyre's statement also, we are waiting not for a Godot, uh, but for another, and doubtless very different Saint Benedict to appear in the modern church. Wilson also proposed not a new Saint Benedict, but Christian communities that may produce a new Saint Benedict, and hoped that God would move to create communities that would imagine new forms of faithfulness for American Christianity. So, in the face of uncertain times, let us focus on establishing a rhythm of life that follows Jesus into the neighborhood as holy listeners in the way of pray, think, love. Our phrase for today is monastic rule and a life for the common good. As I expand on that, a grounding of faith for the sake of the other. So, what is a monastic rule? The Anglican Benedictine monk from Nashodom Abbey writes, a monastic rule is a resource providing for the individual a way into the Christian life of the future through the religious and social turmoil of the present. In a blog post from the new Benedictine community for those seeking the sacred through the Benedictine monasticism, they speak of ordinary people as monks and mystics, lifestyles for spiritual wholeness. A monastic way of living that is to have a deep longing for our own spiritual lives as parishioners, to fulfill that desire and longing for the divine life, but to find it in community, in radical hospitality. A parish is an intentional community that needs to realize that its salvation is bound to Christ in the neighborhood, to see that our life together is inextricably bound to one another. The church is a vehicle of relationship, not an end in of itself. I invite you to choose a rhythm of life for the living of these days that is rooted in a monastic way of connecting prayer and study and action for the other. A new monasticism, small communities that are seeking a deeper experience of divine beyond the ordinary activities and business of the parish life. Communities that are seriously interested in not merely the social aspect of religion, but living into a life of prayer and contemplation and service to others in the world. In Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov, Father Zosima speaks. A monastic is not a special sort of person, but simply what every person ought to be. He goes on in the book. A student of mine once said, a monk or a nun lurks in each of us. One monastic speaks of the way of life as facing one's own longings and dissatisfactions. It is a way through this world on behalf of community. I invite you to clarify a rule of life and to see yourself as mystics and monks of the street, of the city, of the parish, of the neighborhood. claiming a liturgical rhythm for your daily lives, seeing every moment as a moment of Christ. I invite you to see yourselves as part of a community of practice, and the world as your parish, as Wesley wrote. To hold a monastic rule of life for the commons is one, a desire for authentic and true spirituality beyond the merely formal routine of church. Two, a connectedness with others who share this journey. Three, a deep ecumenism and interfaith, joining with, learning from, and welcoming all. A historic, number four, a perspective, learning from the old paths. Five, a heart for the liberation of all creation, equality, fairness, justice for human beings and non-human beings alike. As you write your own monastic rule of life, here are some of the major themes of a Benedictine life, for example, to aid us to think upon how we will live our lives as monastics in our neighborhood. And there is a writing from a monk in an abbey in Paris in some of these aspects of a rule of life that you could apply and write into. One is prayer. What do you seek in your prayer? And what is your greatest challenge to a regular prayer life? He writes. Service. Whose feet do you wash? And do you ever serve someone who cannot repay your kindness? Community. Who is community for you, and how well do you let them know you? Conversion. What change is needed in your heart and life? Obedience. To whom do you listen, especially when you have already made up your mind about something? Stability. It's a big part of the Benedictine monasticism is stability. What is enduring and constant in your life? It's a rooting. It's a connected. That's why this neo-monasticism is deeply rooted to neighborhood, to proximity to the other. Balance. How is that working for you? Hospitality. Who is difficult to accept and embrace? Study. What are you learning about on a daily basis? And are you curious? Zeal. Where is your passion found? Undivided focus. Is there anything in your life that allows you to dissolve into the moment? And daily rhythm. How do you experience the day and the seasons? And how are they expressed in your prayer life? Liturgical seasons as well. So I think it's imperative for us to take these, to dig more deeply, to clarify our core values as Jesus people in the world, a world that is on fire, literally, socially, religiously, and politically, to see our lives as part of a movement of monastic focus, deeply rooted in the stability of the neighborhood, followers of Jesus in a way of radical, uncompromising love and hospitality to the stranger, to live out these rules of life, to learn from the monastic ways to root ourselves in the prayer, study, and action among our neighbors, into the neighborhood, taking it to the streets, and seeing the neighborhood as the epicenter of God's calling. It's as Jeremiah writes to the exiles in Babylon, the 29th chapter. Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, from Jerusalem to Babylon, build houses and live in them, plant gardens and eat what you produce. But seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf. For in its welfare you will find your welfare. For thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel. So a new monasticism for the community begins with our own rule of life, our mission statement, our why, our what, and our how, right where we are. So I encourage you in that for the living of these days as we look ahead to coming months and years. Let us embrace a neo-monastic rhythm coming out of our parishes into the depth of our neighbor's life and hunger. Till we meet again. God bless. Peace.